What's going on, everybody? Thank you for joining us on another episode of Hard Work Beats Talent. We aim to draw upon the insights of some of the people that we admire in order to help our listeners learn from their wisdom as well as their mistakes. My name is Nikita, and as always, I'm joined by my friend and co-host Alex. Alex, what's going on?
Not much. Had a good week.
Yeah?
Yeah, all
Keeping
good.
it moving?
Keeping it moving always.
Love that. Well, I hope your new job is going well, but we'll get into that another time. So with that, we would like to welcome a friend of the show and a personal friend as well, Ben. Thank you for joining us.
No worries.
We're really excited to have a conversation with you about what you do and give our listeners and viewers a bit of an insight into how to get into what it is you do. So just to kick us off, do you want to give us a little bit of elevator pitch style sort of introduction to yourself, what you do, where you come from, maybe some interests you have?
Sure. Yeah. So I'm Ben Marsh. I work in the civil service. I've been there for about 3 years. I think I joined just after Brexit, so I can always tag it to that. I grew up in West London. And I suppose one of my big hobbies is the trumpet. I play the trumpet in a little community jazz band, on the side.
It's quite unique.
It's hard, but that's passionate about working in the public sector and also I suppose passionate about kind of giving everyone the opportunity. So that's something I'd also work at.
And what is your actual role title and what does it look like day to day?
Yeah, so I work in Department of Business on kind of net zero policy. The civil service is a beast. It's
break it down a little bit for us and our listeners, because I don't have too much of an insight of how it all works and the different departments and how it is what you do fits into that. I think you'll be interested to kind of get a bit of an introduction and understanding of the foundations.
Sure, I'll do my best. It might be best Googling it. So there are many kind of departments around Whitehall, Department of Business being one of them. All departments have a couple of ministers, so MPs, elected MPs that run it. So I think of it as the chief executive almost. And then below it, you've got civil servants, and civil servants are people who aren't politically affiliated. And I think it's unique when looking across the world. You've always got civil servants that don't really change with governments. And I think it's a consistency. So there are many different jobs, as with always, in many different professions. But you kind of have policy people, so people who come up with the ideas. You have delivery people, so people who deliver the ideas. And then you've kind of got strategy people who kind of have the oversight of like the general running of the department. And then you kind of at different levels. So I work on net zero stuff. Looking at hydrogen previously on the graduate.
So as in
program.
like renewable energy implementation.
Yeah. So I work on policy, looking at kind of commercial side of trying to get the hydrogen economy going.
Amazing.
Cool. And what would you say the most important skills are for your job? And does it involve working closely with others? Are you working in a silo?
Yeah.
I think that'd be really interesting just to bring it to light a bit.
Yeah, so I think the way to think about it is as everyone knows, the Prime Minister, but Prime Minister changes, but the Prime Minister makes the final decision. So you have ministers, but the key thing is that you kind of think of it as a wheel, I think, and you've got loads of spokes, and the departments are spokes, and then everything has to go through the centre almost to get things signed off finally. So if you're publishing a big policy position paper on net zero saying we want to do X and Y, so there was a big homes thing, the net zero strategy and all this kind of stuff previously, but every policy. And so you cross departments. I also think that you've got, even in departments, you've got different teams. So you're constantly having to work across other people, which is really hard. I think it's both up and down and sideways, and it can sometimes feel a bit motion sickness like. But so I say that's a really key skill. I think also writing and having confidence about writing. But actually, I generally think the biggest skill, and I think this is also applicable in other things, is being happy about mistakes. Learning that mistakes are the way of life, and just being passionate, working hard, being honest, but knowing that you'll make a mistake at some point, and that's okay, and just I think just building on that.
And do you think you were, say, born with these skills, or was it something you developed over the course of your education and career?
No, sorry, I wasn't born with those skills. I think that's a good question. I think we're all. I think a lot of it's luck based. So I was born into a family that happened to be, wealthy, and so I was able to go to private school. So I did have. I don't know. I think you get that you're shielded somewhat, so you have that confidence to some extent. But I think also my parents gave me a lot of freedom. So you learn. So me, my brother, and my sister, it's quite loud around the dinner table, and we're all quite. You learn to work things out yourself. So you have to almost. I think we had to create a lot of boundaries ourselves. So I think you learn those skills. I mean, writing specifically, my writing was shocking, and I think that's one of the key. I think that's one of the things that I've learned anyway is to constantly learn, and you're never finished. And she really kicked me up the arse with my writing, I tell you. But I think that's the thing, right? You've got to learn, you've got to constantly evolve. And I think I hated I hated making mistakes. We all hate making mistakes, but I think I learned that if you don't see past the red pen, you're done for. So I think it's a mixture. I think my parents are super supportive, and I think it's knowing you. I think I'm fortunate knowing that I can make mistakes, and my safety net isn't as low as other people's. That level of dropping isn't as low. But I think it's a combination. Yeah.
I mean, we're both advocates of that principle of don't be afraid to fail, and if you do fail, it's not the end of the world. If you can, try to fail forward so that you're always learning from your mistakes, and you have something else to take away from it and to move you forward. I just want to take it back a little step in terms.
Before we do, you mentioned writing, which I just wanted to kind of pause on, because I think I didn't understand the power of writing, but I'm increasingly seeing its use going forwards. Things are brought to light almost through your words, and your ability to influence, I guess, especially in a position like policy creation, is honed far more through the ability to write, right? So I think it's great that you've had that experience with Alex, with her like almost coaching you through that process and helping you on that journey, because I'm sure it's probably enabled you to do your job even better. I think I think a lot of it's trying to remove things you think about. So I think if you work out how to write and you're confident, but I think I think it depends. I mean, I think part of it's people have always got an opinion on different ways of writing. I think that's what I also, I think I found school quite difficult because it was very literal. So I was like, what was the point of what we're learning? How does it apply? I think I like applying things to understand them. And writing was a certain way. So you had to write in a certain way, right? And I think now understanding grammar, we aren't really taught grammar in school. So like understanding the formations means that when you still get arguments at work when people are like, no, you should write, I don't know, there was a classic one of fora instead of four. Like seriously, got more things to do. But I think it's the confidence. It just frees your mind up, Yeah. And that's the key.
I think particularly as for us who are qualified solicitors, writing's a big part of our jobs, whether it's drafting emails, drafting contracts, applications to regulators, whatever it may be. And as you say, people have different perspectives on writing. They write in different ways and with different styles. And you can sometimes come across some people who will pick up on things which are positive and actually help you in what you're trying to achieve. But sometimes it's, stylistic. And you just think, well, look, I have my own style, you have your own style. Is this change or recommendation going to get us to the common
100%,
goal?
100%.
So that's really interesting.
And I generally think that there was a book called, I don't know if you guys know Sally Rooney. I probably do. But, and
normal people.
Normal people. Yeah, that genuinely. I mean, when I was, so my dad, my parents write in quite a formal way, and I just didn't really speak to me. I never really got the formal, the kind of the quotation marks, the comma after and stuff like that. It never really spoke to me. And then reading Sally Rooney's book, you realise writing's different. You can write however you want. I mean, there's obviously in law you can't do that to some extent, right? But there's always there's a way of doing it.
Yeah.
And I think finding out, being okay that you're happy with your way, but you also can change your way to satisfy other people, just to be like, whatever, let's just get this through. We'll make this change.
Essentially, being adaptable. Right?
Being adaptable, yeah. I think that's a big thing. Recognizing that you can you can make mistakes, you can change, you're happy with your way of doing things. But like you were saying, I mean, writing is a big part of getting things through, but also relationships are massive. And sometimes it's strategic. If someone says, can we make this change? You're like, I think this is rubbish, but I know it's important to you, so I'm going to do that. So that, and then you build that confidence up.
Well, it's building the relationship rapport with who it is you're maybe working with or communicating with. But to build that relationship, to get, whatever it is you're trying to get through, it's communication as well. Because if you're not able to effectively communicate your point, maybe your point of view or perspective, then especially when it doesn't align with someone else's, it could rub them up the wrong way or cause friction, and that's not the best way to build relationships. So they all kind of go hand in hand, don't they? Completely. It's like communication leads on to building positive and effective relationships, and writing as a form of communication as well.
I actually, on that, was listening to a podcast the other day, and it mentioned how all those skills you've described, they don't just add together, they almost multiply. It's almost like the better you are at writing, the better you are at building relationships, because you can actually build a relationship over a written form of communication. I think that's exactly.
I just wanted to take it back slightly. So to your career in the civil service, and for anyone that's listening, they may be thinking, well, I don't know if I want to be a civil servant. They may still be struggling to decide what it is they want to do. And certainly with going into that type of career or profession, it's not like a linear journey to becoming a civil servant. At least from my understanding, it's not like being a solicitor or a doctor where you go to university, you study law or medicine, you graduate, you do your training, and then you're qualified. Do you want to kind of take us through maybe the mindset or the thinking of someone that might be thinking about, is this a job for me? Some of the things they might want to consider, and what's actually involved in like your day-to-day job?
Yeah, it's a good point. I mean, I think one of the key things about civil service is it's massive, and so almost any career you think of, there will be a job in the civil service for it. So whether it's a scientist, whether it's a lawyer, whether it's an economist, whether it's a marine scientist down in wherever, there's a job, and there's an area of interest for everyone. So I think personally, I know I can only do things I'm interested in, and so I made the conscious choice to kind of try and get into civil service. And so I think in terms of thinking about civil service against other jobs, I think it's hard. I mean, I didn't have a lot of other opportunities. My grades were okay from school. I wasn't excellent, so I didn't have, I couldn't be a lawyer. I didn't have that expertise or that kind of skill base. I certainly wasn't ready for it. And so I think you've just got to work out what you've got, like what you're interested in. And so for me, what's great about the civil service is you're doing something that impacts other people every day. So you're doing something that's going to be a positive influence. I mean, it depends on the policy, right? Because if you work on social policy, maybe you wouldn't think that's a positive influence, but you're basically contributing to the running of the country every day. And I think that's quite cool to be around. I also think a big thing is the culture, and it's pros and cons. But if you're in a private sector company, for a private company, you're the bottom line, right? You've got to deliver for the bottom line. Whereas with the civil service, it's slightly different because you don't have any margin that you need to deliver. It's just kind of delivering a policy. So I think there's also the fact that there's a cultural difference, which is good and bad. Sometimes you can get swamps where people don't move for ages, and I was in that in one job, and it wasn't great. But in my current job, people are really passionate. There's no kind of, everyone's driving towards the same end. I mean, there's obviously power and influence in civil service and in politics, but I think most people are trying to do the right thing. So I think it's a difficult one because it's quite hard to articulate what exactly it is because it's so broad, so big. But I think give it a go. You can move around really easily once you're in. It's almost like I don't know. I always think of like Mordor. Once you're in, like you can just do anything you want. So I think it's just give it a go and see what happens. And I think it gives you an insight that I think you wouldn't get elsewhere into kind of the run of the country. So how did the application process go for you then? Was that
an interview, online application form? How did you actually get into the civil service?
So I actually found out about the civil service in my second year of university. I think like most people, no one's got a clue about civil service until they get to university.
Yeah.
I mean, I went to speak. I mentor through an organisation called Voyage Youth, and I did a talk with, I think they were like 15 or 14. And the civil service. I mean, I don't know why they put me up for it. It was cruel, man. It was cruel. They all focused on spies, but I think, I found out in the second year of university, and it took me 3 attempts to get in. So I applied, failed, and I think like all of us. Well, I don't know, like all of us, you guys might be the creme de la creme, but I think you fail a lot, right? And I think that was difficult. But I always knew that I wanted to do something that was interesting. And that was, I don't know, just it's something about it just caught me. I was like, wow, this is cool. This is in like this. I always found politics relatively interesting and energy kind of stuff interesting. So I thought, how can I get that experience?
So just to give our listeners then a bit of an understanding, then did you have like a background before you decided to go in? Because I actually think this conversation is interesting, right? It's not like other professions or other people will talk to with different professions, like I was talking about earlier. So I think it'll be quite cool to know, like, what was your background just before that made you think, oh, do you know what? Actually, I want to have some contribution to the running of the country. Or
I genuinely think it was at school. So I didn't really get school in terms of like learning. I found it difficult to learn about stuff without applying the knowledge. So I was like, why am I learning? What? And I think as a result, a lot of things went on and it for various reasons, but I just couldn't get it. I just didn't get it. And
you know what? And we'll get onto this. We'll get onto this because it resonates with me so much. I think we're similar in that respect. And I went to a state school and stuff. We'll get onto it, but I had exactly the same experience as you. So I'm buzzing.
It's weird, and I think
coming across someone who's had a
similar, and it's weird. And then at university, I kind of went to university because that's what you do. I studied politics because that's what I thought I wanted to do. And to be honest, I think my sister helped me choose the university, but I can't really remember it. It was all quite passive until the civil service. And I think a lot of other things happened. I just went, I think that's what I want to do. Anyway, I left university and through...
what did you study at university?
Politics at university,
Okay.
But again, wasn't quite sure what I wanted to do. And then so I started working for an MP. I managed to get a job with her, again, which is incredibly fortunate. But I worked and I just didn't... It wasn't for me, but I liked the politics. I liked being around it. And so... a lot of things happened. I can quickly listen. But I did masters. I went to Russia for 3 months, and then I kind of applied I think I applied to the civil service in Russia. I don't know how they. I don't know how they allowed me to get
private VPN.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know how that worked, but I was expecting someone to turn up at my door every day, just being like, "What are you doing here?" But and then I just kept applying until I got in. I think it was I generally think it's applying. So I did a master's in war studies, which is a bit, again, I wasn't quite sure I wanted to work in kind of international politics. It kind of all sounds very, very nice and cushy. Kind of did a master's and then went to Russia. But I think I just didn't really know.
It was still surrounded with a lot of uncertainties.
Trying to search out what I wanted to do.
Although you had some sort of fundamental interest, though, right?
I think so. But I didn't have the confidence. So I think a really key example is when I did university essays, my bibliographies were always massive because I didn't have the confidence to say that's enough.
Right.
Like I've looked enough to form an opinion. I wasn't very confident in my opinions, whereas my friends would turn up, do 5 hours, whack an essay in where they said, yes, this is the answer. Whereas I was like, I don't really know where to think.
Sound like a Pisces to me.
I have no idea about star signs. My sister's big into star signs.
You just sound like me.
Just going around in circles. But eventually I thought, you know what? I'm going to work it out. And only recently, the stuff I was talking about earlier, like being confident about mistakes and stuff, that's only really been a recent development. A lot of it took a lot of working through.
Thank you for being so honest, firstly, because I think that'll be really helpful for people to hear who might be going through schooling experiences and not feeling like they're thriving. Even at university, not having that confidence, yet still fast forward a few years, you're doing incredibly well in the civil service. And I just think that's quite an inspirational story to hear, and it's great that you've been able to share that with us.
Yeah, I mean, and I generally think that a lot of people are flying by the seat of their pants, and also I think it's having the confidence to to keep looking, keep searching, because I think sometimes people just settle and they're not happy, but they go, I've got to get a job, I just got to settle.
Fearful of making a change or making a move. And I think you're an example of this yourself, Alex, where you could have quite easily stayed in the legal profession and done that for the rest of your life. And look, who knows where life will take you, or me or Ben. You might come back to it. But you decided that actually it doesn't maybe quite align with your future goals and aspirations, and you want to try something new, and you've jumped into that. So I think for anyone listening, that if you're in school and doing your A-levels or at university, you're not quite sure what it is you want to do, keep persisting, but keep searching. As Ben said,
so.
keep searching, because you may leave and you'll start something. You may enjoy it, which is great. If you don't, well, keep doing it until you find something that you do enjoy.
Yeah, and I think another big part of that is in school you're very much taught that you've got to be excellent. That if you don't get the grades, then you're a failure. And just whether it's explicit or implicit, it's kind of there kicking around. And I genuinely think that sometimes people who have had to struggle to get to where they got to sometimes do a better job because they've learned, they've kind of gone through the shit more, or they've kind of gone. And so I think there's different ways of being successful. Like my girlfriend Alex, she's incredible. Like you look at her grades, it's terrifying, right? But like it's different ways, and you kind of you find success in your own way. And I think that's a real big for me, I think that's the biggest lesson is it's okay to not be good enough. It's okay. And but what does not being good enough mean?
Exactly.
Right? And is it not being good enough in a subject like history? Well, who cares? But maybe you'll be a fantastic zoologist, so that's fine.
And some, like one of our gems, I think that we've already picked up on. We're quite in the early stages of this show, but resilience. Which I think is, and Alex, I don't know if you agree with me, is more important than what you were just saying about what is success,
or natural gifts, I guess.
Or natural gifts, If you're able to fail, as long as you work smart and you continue to work hard and you're resilient, don't get beaten down, just keep it moving.
In fact, I remember hearing a study which showed that was the biggest predeterminant for kids in terms of how well they would do in life. It wasn't necessarily their social class. It wasn't how well they took to particular things. It was the most resilient kids tended in the long run to be the more, I guess, accomplished adults. I think what we're hearing in your story is resilience, getting rejected twice and still pushing forward, and then finally getting the acceptance. Like most people would have said, okay, that's not for me, but recognizing that a no is just a step closer to a yes, and pushing forward.
I think that's true, but I do think there's another bit which is learning from your mistakes, because you can be resilient and keep running against the wall, but if you don't work out, you just climb over it, then there's no point.
That's why you have to learn from your mistakes.
I think that's massive,
and fail forward so that you're not making the same mistakes over and over again.
So just coming back to your job, what would you say is the most surprising thing you found working in the civil service? Some of your experiences, perhaps.
Something that may especially surprise our listeners, right? Because they might think, oh, civil service, that sounds a bit political, a bit boring, but I'm sure you come across quite a lot of exciting stuff as well.
If only. No, I think it's the simplicity and the normalness of things, right? And I think, I genuinely think that most, politics or business, I don't know, whatever, I think it's made to seem grander than it is. Like you're in nice, big, shiny buildings, or like you're in a nice, fancy part of town, or like in Westminster, which is where the civil service largely is, or, if you're based in London, but you can be based across the country as well. And I think that's a good development, but I think it's the normalness of it. And so you have people who are MPs making decisions every day about the future of the country. So we put policy up. We say, we think this is a problem. These are the solutions we suggest based on our analysis. What do you think? And they come back saying, yeah, I think that's good. Let's do it. And then you spend millions, hundreds of thousands, millions, billions on said problem. And there you go. You know what I mean? Like, I genuinely think the biggest surprise is actually the normalness of it, and the fact that therefore anyone can influence it if you apply yourself and you find what you're good at. I think that for me is the biggest surprise is that it's normal. It's relatively not straightforward. It's hard, right? It's really difficult, but it's not.
It's a bit more steady than sort of the ups and downs of maybe some corporate type of jobs.
And we touched upon this in a previous episode around imposter syndrome. I'm sure on day one it felt very grandiose, and it's your experience of working there. So I've certainly had it when working in the legal sector. You go into a glass building, you think you're working on big transactions, big cases, and you think, wow, this is all slightly overwhelming. But given time, most things do become normal, provided you have the blind faith that one day they will be. So I'm sure you're just at that stage, whereas actually in the past you might have found it slightly more daunting.
Maybe, but I think that's true. But I think it's also that, and even you might, it's the same thing. But also like, I suppose AI and stuff like that is incredibly complicated. But I don't know, maybe this is just I don't know. I always think about authority and like, people who speak from up high, right? But I think largely it's logic based, and like you can, even with coding, for example, and Google, massively important companies. But actually, like, I suppose if you break it down, relatively straightforward what they're trying to do. Of course, the coding is incredibly complicated, right? I'm not saying that. And if you apply yourself, I'm sure it's difficult still. But it's like all you're doing is creating policy. You're trying to find solutions. You're looking at analysis. You're writing emails saying, to people. I just think that for me is the biggest thing that I've learned is you need to learn things, of course, but it's not.
It's applying some like analytical and problem solving skills that you need, right?
I think so. Yeah, sure. But and maybe everyone isn't the same. But I think once you work out a job that you're good at or whatever, you can fit in. I don't.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you think? What I was picking up from that was that things can become a lot more simple when you break them down into smaller parts. Yeah,
I think so. But generally, I also think, I think that's right. And I don't know. I think for me, and this may be wrong, but I think when I was at school and growing up, you always saw like big words or like, complicated phrasing or like complicated things. You thought, oh God, this is, I don't know, even banking, right? You've got crazy words, which actually don't mean that complex a thing. And I think it's having I think sometimes people can be put off by that. So if you're not an A-star student, can I do that? Oh, I don't know what maths. I can't do maths. You build up this thing in your head that you go, that's not me. I'm a different type of person. And I think that's a big thing to kind of try and overcome.
And actually, I think you raise a really good point because, of course, sat around the table, you have a master's, we are legally qualified. You might think, okay, well, to be able to do these things, you have to be highly qualified. But some of the most smart and interesting people I know left school after their GCSEs, and they look at these same concepts that you're describing and break them down and move with them. So no, I think it's a good point to dwell on, and for our listeners to hear, like, just because you don't have a fancy title doesn't mean that you can't engage with complicated substance.
Exactly. So I just wanted to ask, for people listening, they may be thinking, well, I'm this type of person or this type of thinker. Is the civil service more appropriate for me over, let's say, a corporate setting? What would you say the distinction is between the two? Would a certain type of character be more suited for the civil service than a corporate job?
I think the first thing that this hypothetical person's asked is that I'm this type of person. I think that's the most important thing. You've got to work out who you are. And you've got to work out what you're about, what works for you, but also understand the framing. So like a classic thing that you hear sometimes is I can't speak languages because I just can't learn languages. I'm that type of person. It's just because you learn differently, right? Maybe you don't learn the way it's taught at school. So I think the first thing is working out what you're about. And then I generally don't think there's that much difference. I mean, I've never worked in the private sector. You guys haven't worked in the public sector. Who knows?
Exactly.
But, I think there are jobs for everyone. And I think once you work out what you're about and what works for you, you can find a job. So, if you're not interested in energy or you're more a strategic thinker that doesn't like getting into the weeds, then you probably wouldn't want to be in the team I'm in at the moment. but then there are other jobs around. So I think the biggest thing is being honest with yourself about what you're about. If you're interested in something and you don't feel like you've got the skill set, finding out how you can get that skill set and like learning and like finding some of the things. But I think, I generally think that maybe there isn't that much difference between it, because I think the biggest thing is humans, right?
Yeah,
humans in both organizations, which means it's going to be driven by a certain way. I suppose you've got a different motive, but power and influence does weird things to people. So even if you're not searching for the money, you're still maybe searching for that, being in the minister's ear or whatever. So it depends, but I think largely it's human organisation, so it probably is more similar than we think.
Awesome.
And you've alluded to it, but beyond your actual work, is there anything outside of work that you do to try and essentially build up your skill base and make you better at what you do?
Yeah, I mean, I think I used to be, Alex has definitely helped like water this down, but I used to be a crazy, growing, I've got to constantly do something,
Personal growth machine.
Growth machine. That's how I used to describe myself, actually. How did you know? Personal growth machine. I might get a t-shirt with that one. I think I used to try and do loads. So when I was in my early 20s, I started learning Russian because I wanted to prove that I could learn Russian.
Yeah.
I wanted to work in international affairs, and I thought I needed a language. Don't know why I chose Russian.
Whole different alphabet, isn't it?
Yeah, Cyrillic alphabet. I went and lived in. I
speak Russian.
Do you?
Ironically, yeah.
Oh no.
Practice with
Я не говорю по-русски.
Yeah, that's very good. That's good.
I haven't spoken for a while, so don't ask me anymore. But I went to St. Petersburg for 3 months. But this kind of thing is I think you've constantly got to look for opportunities to get better, But I do think actually more recently that there's a skill-based thing. So, for example, I'm currently trying to do the Chartered Financial Analyst CFA Level 1 course because I think it's really important for my job and I think it'll do a lot. So I managed to convince department to pay for it.
Amazing.
But also, as I was saying before, played trumpet in a little jazz band,
nice.
Which is again, you're learning something new and it's really enjoyable. But also mentor through this organisation called Voyage. So amazing. Kind of young kids in Hackney, which is great. But then also I think it's also thinking about your personal side and your family and friends side. And I think I used to neglect that. I didn't really see that as important as learning for myself because I think I wasn't confident. I was trying to work myself out. And so recently actually seeing relationships and building relationships as important as
so
work-based.
You mean you neglected more the relationships with your family and friends in terms of learning from them and things like that?
Well, I think just seeing it as not equal to doing Russian or equal to coding or equal to these different things that you can do, not the same thing. Whereas actually I think you see things from your parents and how you're growing up, and I think you just do what you see as right by them. But I think sometimes it's good to challenge what you think is normal. And so I think definitely seeing this differently now.
I think it's Esther Perel that says the quality of your life is determined by the quality of your relationships. And I think such a true saying. You can overdo it on the work front.
Definitely.
At points, right?
But I think it's easy to do, especially, if you see all around us and you see friends trying to grapple for the top and trying to do the best they can do, it's hard to sometimes see the wood for the trees and that stuff. So I think giving yourself a break, and I think I was saying about doing essays at uni, just spending too much time, be clinical, be clear, and then spend time with your friends and stuff.
So I'm mindful of time, and one thing I really wanted to talk to you about was mentoring, because it's something that we're both extremely passionate about and was a big driver towards us starting this podcast.
Yeah.
But before I do, I've got an anecdote of your mentoring. So I think it's probably about a year ago, Ben reached out to me to say he had a mentee who was interested in potentially pursuing a legal career, and asked me if I could talk to him, which I agreed to, of course. And I spoke to this student. He was doing his he was doing his GCSEs at an inner city London school. And we had a great conversation, during which he mentioned that Ben had actually helped him secure a place at a private sixth form, which I thought was fantastic, because having been to a private school and a state school, I recognise how that can completely change the course of someone's life. And I just want to commend you for that and
absolutely.
say that was fantastic. And it actually inspired me to think about how I could improve my approach to mentoring and think about the ways I could positively influence people. But it'd be really helpful to hear about why you mentor and some of the things that you've learned from it.
Just to add to what Alex is saying, again, that's really awesome. Good on you for doing that. And, I'm sure that this chap or girl will appreciate it to their end. And just on the mentoring front, before you continue on, it'll be good to kind of loop it into why and how some of our listeners could find mentors and where they can find mentoring opportunities, because, as with everything, we'll talk about this stuff, but it's really the practical side of it that we want them to take away. Maybe if you can add that.
Yeah, definitely. So practical side first, so I don't forget, because I will forget when I start talking. I think you've just got to work out what you want to achieve. And I think when I say that deliberately, like what you want to achieve, because I think it is important to work out what you're trying to do. And
get out of the mentoring.
I think out of the mentoring, but I think that's definitely secondary. I think that if you, it depends on the person, right? But I do think it's not about you really; it's about the other person. Yeah. But I think you, in the back of your head, as long as you know that you're going to get, I think you're going to get something out of it, and I certainly have, like just by being around these guys.
Oh right, okay. So you're talking about yourself personally.
I think you've got, I do think you've got to work out what kind of thing you want to do. So before doing this mentoring with young people, I volunteered at a drug and alcohol charity by where I grew up, because I lived in this lovely middle class bubble. Not aware of the kind of addiction issues around where I grew up, and I think actually a big changing point, and we may come on to then, but a book I read called Dark Heart by Davies, and it just showed that it was basically looking at the UK and what was going on, and some really dark, harrowing stuff. And you kind of think, actually, I've had a cushy life here. I've been able to make mistakes, and I kind of lived in a bit of a bubble, not a total bubble, but certainly not exposed to everything. I've got a good family, well supported by them. And so I think when you work out what being around them and actually giving back, it was flipping awkward at times at this place, because I was this posh kid walking into this thing, and they just saw me there for the taking. So it was hard, right? But actually you build amazing relationships and you learn a lot. And I think that's the thing, right? When you work out what can you do. And I think it's also you're being modest. So like with this mentoring with the young people, it's not, I don't know the world. I'm not going to be able to impart like these great theories of life. It's about, for me, it's time. I generally think it's just about time. So whatever they want to do, you're there to support them, and you'll give the best you can for them. Because sometimes people, like even contacts, like I think I didn't realise that I was exposed through my parents or through the people you meet. You just got contacts.
Indirectly,
Yeah, so don't be all grandiose and say I'm only going to talk about it. Give them contacts, introduce them to people, let them build their own network.
Absolutely.
So for me, it's just working out what you want to do, whether that's with young people, whether that's something else. But I think you just got to work out what you want to do. And if it's mentoring, that's great. But I think Voyage is a great place, and they do really good work. But I think it's, there are loads out there. So
from a mentee
perspective,
So from a mentee's perspective as well, how would someone go about finding these opportunities or finding a mentor?
I think you've got to look for schemes. I think one of the great things that's happening on kind of corporate governance, which sounds really boring, but in the UK is kind of much more about ESG, which is environmental social governance. And I think that's driving a lot of corporates to spend money on mentoring programs and things about giving back to the community. So I think more and more there's opportunities for you. So I think you just got to look up an organisation in your local area and see if you can get involved. I think you've also got to work out what you're trying to get out of it. So what are you doing, rather than just being a mentee for the sake of being a mentee? What is it? And whether it's just having a conversation, just chatting, that's fine. But work out what you want to do first. But then I think just Google organisations. I think.
Yeah.
So I think both of us have found that mentors have had quite a profound impact on our lives and our careers. I was wondering if you had any key influences growing up, or even now, and what role they play for you.
Good, interesting question. No one really springs to mind, to be perfectly honest. Obviously my parents were around, but I don't think we had that kind of like depth of relationship at that point. So I think you sometimes you speak to some people and you go, wow, okay, that is inspirational, or that makes sense. It just clicks. Sometimes, when you speak to people and you go, wow, that's it. But not really, to be honest. I mean, I can't think of anyone specifically that I suppose mentored me, but I think certainly I came across people who I was inspired by.
You were talking about sort of when you were in school.
Yeah.
You didn't really get school.
Yeah.
We will talk about that in more detail. When you potentially went to university and transitioned, was there someone that sort of helped you find yourself academically? And because there may not be a sort of a consistent mentor that you went to consistently, but they may have just indirectly, inadvertently through their teaching and something that resonated with you that helped you make that transition.
Not really, to be honest. Okay. Yeah, no, I think
like a personal growth journey.
I think so. I mean, and this might be the same for other people, but I don't think people around me were very good at, and I think this is a big thing that I've taken to mentoring, is how you give feedback and how you think about what other people are doing. Because I think, I don't think I was at school or whatever, that I don't think I really ever got it. I don't think people articulated very well like how to go about it. And I think sometimes it's giving the freedom and treating people like adults. And I don't think I was ever really given that by anyone. But I think also it's a growth journey. I mean, I think you was just trying to work out, what am I doing here? Where am I going? And just kind of constantly trying things until it's
introspective thinking.
I think so. Yeah. It's interesting because I never really had anyone that's gone, this is how you should do it or whatever. Yeah. Which is probably why I was going around crazy.
It's an awesome example that, I think sometimes we look to the outside, whether it's to our parents or to our teachers at school, for this guidance, this paved golden path to whatever it is that you want to do, or successes in life and things of that nature. Yeah. But I think we need to shine a light on the fact that actually, particularly as you start to grow into yourselves and into adulthood, you need to take personal responsibility. Yeah, that's a huge thing.
I think it's a big thing. But I think that's right. I do think you have to take responsibility. But I do think, and I think that's why I mentor. I don't mentor to input. I mentor to give space to people, and I don't think I was really ever given the space and respect, I suppose, to have those conversations. Say, I've been thinking about this. What do you think? Like the safe space to not be criticised?
Not criticised or judged.
Exactly. Yeah.
But even then, the mentees that go to find these programs,
taking responsibility.
They're taking responsibility.
Exactly.
It's their own initiative to get out there.
Yeah.
So
it's a mixture.
So please take that away. You can't just sit around and wait for people to say, do this, do that. You have to get up and
it's hard, right? And I think if you do that, be aware that it will be painful. It will hurt. But find some music you like. I mean, that was a big thing for me. I like, people probably won't have heard them, but Hot Chip and The National are big for me, and their words got me through a lot of things, And I think sometimes you just got to find that in yourself and find that resilience. But I think as you grow, as I've grown older, probably wasn't the healthiest of things to do. So definitely try and find a mentor or someone who you can speak to, because I think it's a lot to carry on your own shoulders. Yeah.
Oh, fantastic. And you alluded to it there with, I think it was Dark Heart you mentioned.
Yeah.
But are there any books or podcasts that have been particularly meaningful to you and you think would benefit our listeners? Yeah.
So I generally, I think it depends, right? It's all about your own perspective and trying to understand how you fit in, and for me it was Dark Heart kind of shook me up, definitely, and I was like, okay, it's not as sweet. I think you grow up thinking that your life is normal, and maybe you guys didn't, but I certainly didn't think that going to Africa on holiday or doing these crazy holidays wasn't normal. I thought it was normal.
Yeah.
And so reading this book, I was like, okay, this is interesting. This isn't something I've been exposed to before, and that honestly, it was just eye-opening and just kind of it was horrible. It's a really horrible book, but it's beautiful and articulate in the same way.
Gives you a different perspective.
And that's what I like about books that challenge you. And I think then there's the Why I'm No Longer Talking to White People About Race was also really important.
That's been mentioned actually before as well.
Yeah, just to see as a posh white male, I'm the archetype of whiteness, I think. But understanding how you fit in and how other people see you, I think is really important as well. And then finally, the Sally Rooney book I've mentioned before, just because it just said to me, I was, oh my God, you can write like this? Seriously? Wow. So those three, the big ones.
And certainly with those first two books, do you think they've played a role in what it is you do and like your drive towards, I guess, social good?
Yeah, I think that's another thing. I think, and everyone's on their own path, right? But I think I recognise how lucky I've been, and I almost feel like a duty to give back. I know it sounds corny, and I've never worked out how to say it without sounding corny, but I think it's a big thing for me that I'm comfortable. I've been comfortable my whole life. How can I help people who aren't? Because at the end of the day, you need less, I suppose, not fewer people like me, but I think you need more of other people to change and make things better. So
I think that's really awesome, and it's actually a privilege to have you on this podcast because these experiences and ideas is exactly what we want to share, and with people who maybe didn't have the best start to life, or maybe don't have the contacts and the ability to have insights from people like such as yourself, or our other guests, so at least they can listen and get a bit of a better idea.
And I think it also shows that if you are, say, on one of these mentoring schemes, and you have Ben sat across the table from you, these things do matter to people who've had very different upbringings, and for a range of reasons. You've mentioned a couple of books there, but how your experiences have made mentoring important. I think it's good for mentees to know that, so that when they're sat across the table, although they might not identify from an experience perspective with the person they're dealing with, I guess on a principles level, it's very much the same.
It is, but I think a big thing as well that I've learned is your experience is as valid as other people's, and I think that's a really important thing. If you, I don't know, if like one of your parents do something that you think isn't particularly important or whatever, you can always, there's just because they do it that, maybe isn't a trendy job or whatever, or it's not, it's not earning loads of money. It was not invalid, right? And I think that's a really important thing to remember.
And do you think there was pressure at all from your parents in terms of career, or so they?
That was the amazing thing about them. There was no pressure. I think genuinely amazing to give me the space to just work out what I wanted to do, which is hard sometimes, right? And sometimes you want more support, or more shaping anyway of your journey. But no, there was never any pressure at all.
So there was, so you guess they never really tried to
push you down a path.
You down a path like
we wouldn't have gone. We'd have fought back. I remember they tried to get
rebellious.
They tried to get us doing French lessons when we were like 8, and we were just having none of it.
Want to do Russian?
Get me a harder language.
Awesome.
But no, I think but I think that's important to remember. Like, you'll see people like me who can speak, articulately that look like they've got everything together, and you might go, oh, hold on, this person's better than me.
I think that's a perfect segue. I mean, unless you had anything else to add on the mentoring side, but I think it's a really great segue into that discussion around your schooling experience, and why I feel so passionate about it, why it resonates so much with me, because using the sort of phraseology and the terms that you did, it's like it switched on this light bulb in my mind, because when I was at school, and I don't know whether it was my experience of maybe English being as a second language, even though Russian really is like my second language, even though I learned it first, or the way I think because of English not being my second language. I don't know, but I don't really get sort of learning at school through sort of GCSEs and A levels in particular. I got my I think I got 6 or 7 A to C's. Well, I didn't get any A's. It was like B, and the rest were like C's and stuff at GCSE. And then at A level in particular, I far from excelled. It was like in the D range. And then there's me, and my mum was kind of helping guide me down certain professional paths. I rebelled at one point. I wanted to do something completely different. And it was only when I took a gap year after my A levels to just take a break, find myself and mature. It was when I, kind of thought, okay, I'm going to go and do this commercial law and business management degree because it's not entirely legally focused. It's got some range to it. But then when I got there, the switch went on, and I thought, right, okay, I'm really starting to get it. I'm understanding how to sit exams, and that was the key thing. I didn't get how to sit exams, And even though the knowledge is there, it's how you put it down on the paper. I didn't get that. And when I went to uni, I was absolutely determined, because I had grown as well on my gap year, and just taken a time out. Like I just grafted away, and I really got to understand it a lot better. And I left uni with a first class honours degree. What one of my teachers would have thought, a guy who left with like 2 Ds and an E at A level would get a first class honours like law and business degree. And that after that, I was like, you know what? I didn't get it. I applied myself. I worked hard to learn what it takes and play the game ultimately of exams. And that's, was my springboard to what I'm doing today. So, and just to make one final point, where you said, you didn't do particularly well at school, and so maybe the legal profession was a bit out of your reach. I'm going to challenge that because that was exactly me. And I want our listeners to really understand that it could also be you, but if you apply yourself, and like we said before, integrity, hard work, smart work, build your communication, your network, you can achieve what you set out to achieve. So that's just like a bit of background on me. So I don't know if you want to share anything else on your experiences from that respect.
Yeah, no, 100%. I agree with you that I think you can do anything. It might take longer, and I think that's one thing to bear in mind. It might just take a lot longer, and that's fine.
And it did.
Right?
It did take me longer because I only qualified 18 months ago. Right, I didn't take the linear path. It took me about 10 years.
And I know my experiences are slightly different to both of yours, but one thing I would say, we've got 3 males sat around the table. I think it's quite often that almost academic maturity might take a little bit longer for guys at times. And I know as I've gotten older, I look back at the way I approached university and think, you were crazy. And I guess the persistence, irrespective of the results, which don't define you, as I think we've got 2 really clear examples of here, is what's important. It's not you have to get straight A's and A stars and then you're going to fly. Like people take different routes, and the resilience, I guess, plays out in the end.
I think that's right.
It's like those knockbacks. You get the knockbacks, and you might fail a module, or you might fail an A level and have to resit it. It's not the end of the world, right? You can redo it. Just apply yourself. The resilience will continue to build. And you will get there. Don't be
did you at school, what else did you do? Were you good at something else? Did you enjoy doing something else?
In terms of, well,
outside academic stuff.
Outside of academic stuff, it was more sport. I did a lot of boxing, and I played football. At times boxing was the kind of like the main sport that I participated in. But I really saw school as just like this thing I had to do, and it was this academic wheel that you had to go around in order to get anywhere in life. So it's immensely important, I think. You need to build that academic foundation, but if you have stumbling blocks along the way, don't be disheartened by it.
Like a boxer almost in a ring, right?
Exactly. On my way here, actually, I was thinking about that analogy. I was thinking life, you have people around you, your team in your camp when you're training for a fight or something. But when you're in the ring, it's just you and your opponent. And your opponent is almost like life. And you might get knockbacks and you might take a few on the chin. But, like that old saying, it's not how many times you get knocked down, it's how many times you get back up, keep it moving. As, cliche as it might sound.
I think I heard the other day that life is a single player game with multiplayer quests. But I think the team you have around you is so important.
Because you can go back to your corner and you can get inspiration or advice, and then you go again.
I also think that I was going to say the reason I asked is because I loved sport when I was younger, and for me that was my main focus. I just couldn't wait to play football. I couldn't wait to play cricket. That was just what I loved. And I think sometimes it's something my mum I think was really good at, amazing and quite inspiring. I just be the best you can be in whatever you want to do. So if that's football, that's cricket, hard. just do it. And I think sometimes you can focus too much on academic stuff. And don't be shy to bring that into, if you're applying for an internship or applying for something, don't think it's less important, because it's not. Like, I've got friends, I went to school with people who just did academic stuff and they didn't have the same kind of maybe communication skills or ability to kind of, if you play football or if you box, do whatever, you're playing with people from across the spectrum of society. And if you can work out how to avoid being wiped out by someone from you know what I mean, like you just get, and you build up a language, build up a kind of rapport and understanding of how you speak to people from and more confident in yourself. And I think that's a really important thing as well, just to remember that there are always things you can take away from everything.
That really resonates with me because and we'll probably get onto it on another pod, but I was super passionate about football growing up, and academics really weren't a focus for me, but I think that mastery of a skill, that mindset's transferable, right, to now probably what you do, whether it be in the trumpet, learning Russian, coding, your job. It's that same, I want to be the best footballer I can be, so I'm going to build my skill set here. You transfer to your other endeavours.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And I think that's right. And I think that's why don't be shy. It kind of annoys me to some extent when people, all they talk about is what A stars you got. And you're like, well, is that really, like, of course that's important, but do you know how to look after yourself on a crap pitch somewhere in Ruislip on a rainy day,
on a rainy Sunday.
Give us maybe ice floor, ice pitch, whatever.
Or can you be in a certain room with certain people, and irrespective of
who
your background or who's there, you can carry yourself.
And that's what actually someone I'm mentoring at the moment, they were talking, they put in their, I can't remember, was it an application or something, that I think they want to be a lawyer, and they were saying that they play football, and actually that's one of the things, they as a lawyer, you've got to work with clients. You don't get to choose who your clients are. And so that, I thought that was brilliant, because I thought, he's really understood what skills he's got. And I think that's the thing, look into yourself, take time to look into yourself and what you can do.
And everyone learns and thinks differently.
Exactly.
Right. I'm a very practical learner. I learn on the job. I learn through experience. Hence why I think, ultimately, when I've really tried to think introspectively, and why don't I get exams? It's because that's not my way of learning. I don't, for me to pass exams, it's like memorizing, repetition, put it on paper in the format that they expect you to put it in. And that was the sort of strategy that I employed. But when I finished that and went into work, I said, okay, now I can apply my actual the skill that I'm good at, which is learn practically. So I talk to people, ask lots of questions. I then have a go. I go back and ask them for their opinion. And that's how I actually get it into my system.
I think that's such a good example of the fact that you might not necessarily have the best of it at school, but look at you now, you're flourishing in your work and environment, winning awards, closing deals, and having the kind of confidence and faith that how school goes isn't necessarily how work's going to
go, or how your life will pan out.
Exactly.
Definitely very, very passionate about that. So don't be disheartened. So I think what we like to do as well is shine a light on people's challenges and some of the key things that maybe where they may have experienced some failure, and how they overcame those things. So can you think of maybe 1, 2, 3 things where in your lifetime were kind of key points that were a turning point where you learned something new or it inspired some growth?
I think that the straightforward answer is every day. Your
personal growth machine.
Every day, man. like a Pac-Man, just eating up those learning opportunities. I think generally every day. There's a good one that sticks in my head, which I think almost drove me to a mental asylum. Was in the MP's office. I was in charge of writing these letters to constituents, and as I said before, my writing was shocking, and so every letter, I'm telling you, every letter was corrected, and there were hundreds of letters that needed to be sent out in a week. Ooh. I tell you what, I almost went crazy. I thought, right, I've done it finally, and then I get the letter back. Not again. Sorry for swearing so much, by the way. I told myself not to, but it's, I don't know how I switch off at work. But I think that was really hard because I thought, I'm just not good enough, am I? I'm just not good enough for this. But I think there's always a reason why you do something. So, I just didn't enjoy the job. So I wasn't really giving 100%. And I knew that in the back of my head, but I just didn't want to accept it. And so I wasn't being honest with myself. And so I learned, okay, if you're going to do something, do it properly. Yeah, you might not enjoy it, but just do it. So I think that was an important thing. I also, when I was younger, I had a football injury, and I've had about 4 or 5 operations on my left knee. Can't run anymore.
Oh, wow.
Can't do sport. And that was really
That's
hard.
difficult.
Yeah, because that was a big part of my identity. But I think that was really hard because I had to pivot. I had to be like, right, I can't do this. This isn't part of me. So what am I going to do? How am I going to find myself? I mean, I left university, as I say, didn't really know what I wanted to do. So it was a massive thing of going, okay, this is really hard. What am I going to do? And just kind of trying to work things out and just going forward and yeah, looking. I think a lot of what I do, I think two key things that I do. One is kind of reflect on how you can do things better and be gracious, I suppose, with mistakes and learning. I think another one is feedback.
Yeah, massively
important. Don't be afraid to ask feedback. It's not always going to be nice, but you need to ask feedback.
Yeah, don't be afraid.
So to wrap up, I just want to reflect on some of the key things that come out of that, because I think it's been a really fascinating conversation.
It's been really cool.
I feel like we could have probably spoken for a bit longer, and I've certainly learned a lot. And really grateful for you coming on and sharing your experiences. For me, your ability to overcome challenges, whether that be in school, whether that be through the application process, and learning from any mistakes you made during those challenges, I think is something that all of our listeners and ourselves could learn from. I also think that your focus on relationships and recognizing that can make life go a bit more smoothly in the working context and the personal context is something that we should all probably reflect on a little bit more. And just the continuous grit. So regardless of what happens, the resilience to keep going, I think, is something I certainly take away from this conversation and will hope to employ personally. I don't know if you wanted to add anything.
Yeah, absolutely. So just to reflect on what Alex said, thank you so much for coming on. It's been a really interesting conversation, and thanks for being so open and honest as well. I think that will be key for our listeners. Some of the key things I've taken away from your professional experience in the civil service, I think it's quite clear. It's very broad. Pretty much anyone doing with some skill can find a job that's right for them. So definitely, explore it and see what comes out of it for you. You don't need like a specific degree or things like that. That there are opportunities and possibilities. Some key skills are obviously, the communication, relationship building, and writing, which is something that we touched on. So if you're thinking about maybe taking a job in the civil service, writing, and it's very transferable, right? You can use that in many settings. And I think two very main points and gems that we'll probably take away is don't be afraid to make mistakes. Mistakes will happen. Learn from them, pick yourself back up, and keep it moving. And along with that will come adaptability. Don't be afraid to adapt, because as you learn, you'll need to apply yourself differently. So with that, one final thank you. Thanks for joining us, everybody. Obviously follow us on Instagram, YouTube, and all the channels. Hard Work Beats Talent podcast. And we'll catch you on the next one.
Over and out.
Cheers, guys.
Thanks, mate.